Commander Vex adjusted his viewing apparatus with the practiced indifference of someone who had observed 17 different species over the course of his distinguished career. The small blue-green world spinning lazily below their cloaked observation vessel looked positively mundane compared to the crystalline cities of Zentara Prime or the floating metropolises of the gas giant Nexus. This particular rock, which the locals had so creatively named Kepler 442 billion, housed what could generously be called a settlement. If you squinted really hard and ignored the complete lack of proper infrastructure. Remind me again why High Command considers these creatures worth studying? Vex drawled, his three eyes focusing independently on different sections of the human colony. They have been here for what, 6 rotations? And they are still living in metal boxes. Metal boxes, Kira. Not even properly synthesized biodomes or quantum-stable habitation units, but just boxes. Dr. Kira Thane, the expedition's lead xenobiologist, didn't look up from her data screens. Her tentacles danced across holographic interfaces with the fluid grace of someone who had spent far too many cycles analyzing primitive civilizations. Because, dear Commander, these particular bipeds have done something rather unusual. They have survived every single extinction-level event their home world has thrown at them. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, plague outbreaks that should have wiped them clean off their planet's surface. Yet here they are, spreading to other worlds like some sort of persistent fungal infection. Vex's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. Survival instinct does not equal intelligence, Doctor. My home world's sludge parasites have survived for millions of cycles, but that doesn't make them worthy of study. It just makes them exceptionally difficult to eliminate. Ah, but that's where you are wrong. Kira finally turned away from her screens, her silvery eyes gleaming with the particular enthusiasm that made Vex deeply uncomfortable. It was the same look she'd had right before their last expedition had gone sideways on Proxima Station. These humans don't just survive, Commander. They adapt. They improvise. They take situations that should logically result in their complete annihilation and somehow turn them into minor inconveniences. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum viewing ports, they could see the human settlement bustling with activity. Tiny figures moved between the metal structures with purpose, tending to what appeared to be some sort of agricultural project. Several humans were actually outside their protective barriers, breathing the planet's atmosphere without any visible life support systems. Look at them, Vex said, gesturing with one of his forearms toward the colony. They are essentially camping. On an alien world. For recreational purposes, apparently. What kind of species colonizes a planet and then decides to grow their food in dirt? Real dirt, not even hydroponic solutions or nutrient synthesis chambers. Kira's data pad chirped softly. Which brings us to today's experiment, Commander. High Command wants to understand human stress responses under controlled conditions. Nothing dramatic, mind you. Just gentle provocations to observe their behavioral patterns. Gentle provocations. Vex repeated the phrase like he was tasting something unpleasant. Please tell me you haven't devised another one of your elaborate schemes that will result in me explaining to High Command why we accidentally started an interplanetary incident. Commander, you wound me. Kira's voice dripped with mock innocence. This is simply a series of minor technical difficulties. Equipment malfunctions, communication disruptions, perhaps a few weather modification events. Nothing these resourceful humans can't handle with their charming, primitive solutions. Vex pulled up the experiment protocols on his personal display and immediately regretted his decision. Doctor, this list includes electromagnetic pulse bursts, atmospheric ionization, and gravitational field fluctuations. In what universe do you consider these minor inconveniences? The same universe where humans decide to leave their perfectly habitable homeworld to live in metal boxes on a planet they know absolutely nothing about, Kira replied cheerfully. Besides, we are talking about the species that once strapped themselves to controlled explosions just to reach their own moon. A little electromagnetic interference shouldn't pose any real challenge. The observation station's main computer chimed softly, indicating all systems were ready for the experimental phase. Vex stared at the peaceful human settlement below and felt the distinct sensation that they were about to make a terrible mistake. Not that he would admit such concerns to Kira, who was already programming the first wave of minor inconveniences with the enthusiasm of a child unwrapping gift packages. Very well, Doctor. Initiate your behavioral study. But when these humans inevitably do something completely illogical and unpredictable, I want it noted in the official record that I expressed reservations about this entire endeavor. Kira's tentacles flew across her control interfaces. He duly noted, Commander. Now, let's see how these remarkable little survivors handle a few unexpected challenges. I'm particularly curious about their problem-solving methodologies when faced with technological failures. As the first electromagnetic pulse discharged toward the human settlement, Vex couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to learn something about human problem-solving that High Command's carefully worded mission parameters hadn't quite prepared them for. The humans were about to show them exactly why survival wasn't just about endurance. Sometimes it was about what happened when something survived long enough to become genuinely annoyed. The electromagnetic pulse hit the human settlement at exactly 1400 hours, Colony Standard Time. From their comfortable observation deck, Vex and Kira watched with scientific detachment as various pieces of human technology flickered, sparked, and went dark. The communication arrays fell silent. Power grids stuttered. The environmental controls hiccuped momentarily before backup systems kicked in. Textbook response so far, Kira noted, her tentacles dancing across monitoring equipment. Initial confusion, minor panic indicators, standard emergency protocols activating. Quite predictable, really. Vex nodded approvingly. See? I told you these creatures would follow basic survival patterns. Look, they are already gathering in groups, probably to discuss their technological failures in whatever primitive communication methods they. Commander. Kira's voice had lost its casual confidence. You might want to focus Optical Array 7 on the main administration building. Vex adjusted his viewing apparatus and immediately wished he hadn't. Standing outside the largest metal structure, a human female was speaking rapidly into what appeared to be a manually operated communication device. More concerning was the fact that she didn't look confused, panicked, or even particularly surprised. She looked angry. Audio enhancement, maximum sensitivity, Vex ordered. The observation deck's speakers crackled to life, filling the space with the distinctly unsettling sound of human vocal patterns. The female's voice cut through the static with razor-sharp precision. I don't care if it looks like a solar flare, Marcus. Solar flares don't hit with that kind of surgical precision. Someone just took out our primary communication grid, our main power distribution network, and exactly 3 of our 7 backup generators. That's not random. That's targeted. Dr. Vex said slowly, his 3 eyes fixed on the human below. Please tell me this creature is not suggesting what I think she is suggesting. Kira's silvery eyes had gone wide. Impossible. The electromagnetic pulse was designed to mimic natural phenomena. There's absolutely no way they could identify it as artificial interference. Their technology isn't sophisticated enough to. Ma'am, came another human voice through the speakers. We are reading trace electromagnetic signatures that don't match any known stellar phenomena. Plus, the timing was too convenient, right when we were about to activate the new mining operation. The female human's response made Vex's mandibles click nervously. Exactly. Someone doesn't want us expanding our operations here, which means someone has been watching us. Which means we are not alone. Which means. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a tone that made both aliens exchange uncomfortable glances. This is an act of war. War. Kira exclaimed, her tentacles recoiling from her control panels as if they'd been electrified. Did she just say war? Over a minor electromagnetic disturbance? Vex couldn't take his eyes off the human settlement leader. She was moving now, issuing rapid-fire instructions to other humans who had gathered around her. Her gestures were precise, economical, purposeful. This was not the behavior of a primitive creature faced with inexplicable technological failures. This was the behavior of someone who had immediately identified a threat and was taking action. "Commander," Kira said, her voice climbing several octaves, "surely she can't be serious. We delivered a minor inconvenience, a tiny disruption, a gentle provocation designed to test their stress responses. She's treating it like an attack," Vex finished grimly. "Doctor, what exactly did our mission briefings say about human defensive capabilities?" "Well, they mentioned something about humans being unusually aggressive for a developing species, but that was in the context of territorial disputes with their own kind. Surely they wouldn't consider our harmless research activities to be." "Attention, unknown observers," the human female's voice suddenly boomed through their speakers with crystal clarity. Both aliens froze. The human was looking directly up at their position, not approximately in their direction, not scanning the sky randomly. She was looking right at them, despite their ship being completely cloaked and positioned in high orbit. "My name is Luna Torres, and I am the elected representative of New Anchorage Colony. Approximately 14 minutes ago, you conducted what you probably consider a harmless test of our technological resilience. I'm here to inform you that we consider any unauthorized interference with our equipment to be an act of aggression." Kira's tentacles had gone completely rigid. How is she doing this? Our communication systems are completely isolated from their networks. There's no possible way she could access our. "You have 36 hours to identify yourselves and explain your intentions," Luna continued, her voice carrying the kind of calm authority that suggested she was entirely serious about whatever consequences she had in mind. "A failure to respond will result in escalated defensive measures. I strongly advise against testing our resolve in this matter." The transmission cut off, leaving the observation deck in stunned silence. "Escalated defensive measures," Vex repeated slowly. "Did she just threaten us?" "She can't threaten us." Kira's voice had gone shrill. "She's living in a metal box, on a planet with no industrial infrastructure, using technology that's barely advanced enough to achieve basic spaceflight. She has no weapons, no defenses, no possible way to even locate our position, let alone—" Dr. Vex interrupted, his voice very quiet. "She just did locate our position. And judging by the way her people are moving down there, I don't think she considers her lack of advanced weaponry to be a significant obstacle." Through the viewing ports, they could see the human settlement transforming. What had been a peaceful collection of simple structures was rapidly becoming something that looked distinctly more organized, more purposeful, more militaristic. "Perhaps," Vex said carefully, "we should reconsider the scope of our behavioral study." Kira was staring at her data screens in bewilderment. But they are supposed to be primitive. They are supposed to be predictable. They are supposed to react with fear and confusion, not whatever this is." Down below, Luna Torres had gathered what appeared to be her senior staff around a hastily erected command center. Even from their orbital position, the aliens could see the sense of purpose radiating from the human settlement. Dr. Vex said, his voice heavy with the growing certainty that their simple behavioral study had just become significantly more complicated. "I believe we may have severely underestimated our test subjects." 22 hours had passed since Luna Torres issued her ultimatum, and Vex was beginning to understand why his predecessor had retired early to pursue meditation on the peaceful moon of Serenity Base. What he was observing through the optical arrays defied every piece of xenobiological data in their comprehensive databases. "Status report, Doctor," he said, though part of him already dreaded the answer. Kira's tentacles moved frantically between multiple data streams, her usual scientific composure replaced by something that looked suspiciously like panic. "Commander, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you contradicts 17 established theories about primitive species development." "Just give me the report, Kira." "In the past 21 hours, the humans have completely restructured their settlement's defensive capabilities using nothing but salvaged materials, improvised electronics, and what appears to be sheer stubborn determination." Kira paused to recalibrate her sensors for the third time. They have constructed electromagnetic field generators from mining equipment, fashioned communication jammers from agricultural sensors, and somehow converted their water purification systems into, well, I'm not entirely sure what they have converted them into. But our passive scans keep getting deflected. Vex focused his primary optical array on the human settlement and immediately regretted the decision. Where there had once been a simple collection of utilitarian structures, there was now something that looked disturbingly like a fortress. The defensive barriers had sprouted from nowhere, sensor arrays pointed skyward from improvised towers, and humans moved through it all with the kind of organized efficiency that suggested they'd done this sort of thing before. Dr. T's, please tell me you have a logical explanation for how a species that barely mastered interplanetary travel has managed to construct military-grade defensive installations in less than one planetary rotation. I wish I could, Commander. Kira's voice had gone very small. According to our xenobiological models, when faced with superior technology, primitive species should exhibit either submission behaviors or disorganized panic responses. They should not. She gestured helplessly at her displays. They should not do whatever this is. Through the speakers, they could hear fragments of human communication as Luna Torres coordinated her people's activities. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone completely comfortable with emergency situations. Marcus, how's the mirror array coming? Good. Position it to reflect solar radiation toward grid coordinates 777 Alpha. Sarah, I need those signal boosters operational in 15 minutes. Tommy, start rotating the frequency dampeners every 6 minutes, random intervals. Mirror array? Vex's mandibles clicked nervously. What possible use could they have for, Doctor? Are they attempting to signal their home world? No, Commander. Kira's voice had gone very quiet. According to spectral analysis, they are using focused solar reflection to create targeted electromagnetic interference. They are building their own directed energy weapons. The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of monitoring equipment and the increasingly organized chatter from the human settlement. Vex watched as Luna Torres moved between different work groups, checking progress, offering suggestions, and solving problems with the kind of methodical precision that made his stomach sacs clench uncomfortably. Doctor, remind me again why High Command classified this species as technologically primitive. Because they are. Kira's frustration was evident in the way her tentacles lashed against her control panels. Their spaceflight capabilities are basic chemical propulsion. Their energy generation relies on fusion reactors that are barely more sophisticated than controlled explosions. Their materials science is centuries behind galactic standard. They should not be capable of. Of what? Of adapting this quickly. Or this effectively. Commander, watch this. Kira highlighted a section of the human settlement where several humans were working on what appeared to be a large metallic dish. 6 hours ago, that was a communication relay. Now they have reconfigured it into a high-gain sensor array that's actively scanning our position. Vex felt his 3 eyes focus independently on the human construction. Scanning our position? Through our cloaking field? Through our cloaking field. Commander, I don't think they are trying to see us. I think they are trying to map our gravitational signature by measuring minute variations in stellar radiation patterns. The implications of that statement hit Vex like a plasma bolt to the cerebral cortex. Doctor, are you telling me that these primitive creatures have reverse-engineered gravitational detection technology in less than one planetary day? I'm telling you that Luna Torres and her people are solving complex technical problems in ways that our databases say should be impossible for a species at their development level. Kira's voice carried a note of something that might have been admiration, if admiration weren't such an inappropriate emotion for a xenobiologist observing test subjects. Sir, came another human voice through their monitoring systems, we have got 3 more mirror arrays operational, and Jackson's team finished modifying the atmospheric processors. We can start ionospheric manipulation whenever you give the word. Ionospheric manipulation, Vex repeated faintly. They are going to manipulate their planet's ionosphere as a weapon. using equipment designed for terraforming. Through the optical array, they could see Luna Torres checking something on a handheld device before responding to her subordinate. "Not yet, Marcus. Let's see if our uninvited guests decide to introduce themselves first. But keep everything ready. If they want to play games with our technology, we will show them what happens when humans get creative." The way she said creative made Vex's mandibles click involuntarily. In his experience, when humans described themselves as creative, disasters generally followed. "Doctor," he said carefully, "how much of their defensive preparation do you think is visible from our current position?" Kira consulted her sensors, and when she looked up, her silvery eyes held an expression that Vex had never seen before. Fear mixed with something that might have been respect. "Commander, I don't think we are seeing their defensive preparations. I think we are seeing what they want us to see. The question is, what aren't they showing us?" As if summoned by their conversation, Luna Torres' voice crackled through their speakers once again. "Unknown observers, this is your 18-hour notice. We have spent the last day improving our local infrastructure. I thought you might be interested to know that human creativity tends to flourish under pressure. We are looking forward to demonstrating our innovations." The transmission ended, leaving the observation deck in uncomfortable silence. Vex stared at the human settlement, trying to process the fact that their simple behavioral study had somehow transformed into what appeared to be a siege situation. "Doctor," he said finally, "I'm beginning to think our test subjects have become significantly more dangerous than anticipated." Kira nodded slowly. "Commander, I'm beginning to think we were never the ones conducting the test." 14 hours before Luna Torres' deadline expired, Vex discovered what humans meant by getting creative. It started with something so subtle that he almost missed it entirely, a minor fluctuation in their ship's gravitational compensation systems. "Doctor, are you registering any anomalous readings from our primary stabilizers?" Kira looked up from her workstation, where she'd been obsessively monitoring human communications for the past 6 hours. "Define anomalous, Commander. Because if you mean completely impossible according to known physics, then yes, I'm reading several." Before Vex could ask for clarification, their main display screens flickered momentarily. It's not the controlled flicker of a system reset, but the chaotic strobing that indicated fundamental interference with their quantum processing cores. "That," Vex said slowly, "should not be possible. Our computing systems are shielded against electromagnetic interference up to Class 12 stellar events. A planetary civilization using primitive electronics should not be able to." "Commander." Kira's voice had gone very flat. "Focus optical array 12 on the northwestern section of the human settlement." Vex adjusted his viewing apparatus and felt his stomach sacs contract violently. The humans had constructed what appeared to be a massive dish array, but it wasn't pointing toward space. It was pointing directly at their ship's position, and it was pulsing with a strange, rhythmic energy signature. "What exactly am I looking at, Doctor?" "As near as I can determine, they have created a quantum resonance disruptor using nothing but their communication equipment, solar collection panels, and what appears to be components salvaged from their food preparation units." Kira's tentacles were moving frantically across her control interfaces. "Commander, they are somehow generating quantum interference patterns that are specifically tuned to disrupt our ship's systems." "That's ridiculous. Quantum resonance theory requires computational models that take our most advanced system cycles to calculate. They can't possibly have the processing power to." The lights went out. Not dimmed. Not reduced to emergency levels. Completely, utterly dark, except for the faint glow of emergency bioluminescent strips that activated only when primary, secondary, and tertiary power systems had failed simultaneously. In the darkness, Kira's voice carried a note of professional fascination mixed with genuine terror. "Commander, I believe they just turned off our ship." "Ships don't just turn off, Doctor. We have 17 independent power generation systems, each with multiple redundancy protocols and—" The lights came back on, but wrong. Instead of the steady blue-white illumination of their quantum luminescence panels, Everything was bathed in the harsh yellow-red glow of primitive emergency lighting. Worse, their control interfaces were displaying error messages in languages that definitely weren't part of their ship's programming. "Doctor, why are our computers speaking human languages?" "Because," Kira said, her voice climbing toward hysteria, "somehow they have gained access to our primary communication protocols, and they are rewriting our interface systems in real time. Commander, they are hacking our ship using technology that shouldn't be capable of recognizing our systems exist." Vex stared at his control panel, which was now displaying what appeared to be a message written in human text characters. He didn't speak their language, but he was fairly certain the meaning would not improve his current situation. "Translation, Doctor. It says, 'Hello, Vex. We need to talk. Please respond on frequency 447.3 MHz. Sincerely, Luna Torres.'" The observation deck fell silent except for the increasingly urgent chirping of various system alerts. Through their viewing ports, the human settlement looked the same as it had hours earlier, but now that peaceful appearance felt distinctly ominous. "She knows my name," Vex said faintly. "She knows your name. She's gained access to our computer systems. She's somehow interfaced with our quantum processing cores, and she's systematically demonstrating that our technology isn't nearly as advanced as we thought it was." Kira was checking readings on multiple displays, her tentacles moving with the frantic energy of someone trying to understand an impossible situation. "Commander, I need you to consider the possibility that our entire assessment of human technological capabilities has been fundamentally incorrect." "Incorrect how?" "Incorrect in that we assumed primitive meant inferior. What if primitive just means different? What if they have developed along completely different technological pathways that make our systems vulnerable in ways we never anticipated?" Before Vex could respond, their main communication system activated without any input from their crew. Luna Torres' voice filled the observation deck with crystal clarity. "Good evening, Commander Vex and Dr. Kira Thane. I apologize for the intrusion, but since you seem reluctant to respond to polite requests, I thought I'd demonstrate some of our local capabilities." "How?" Vex whispered. "Does she know our names?" "Your ship's identification protocols were surprisingly easy to access once we figured out your quantum encryption patterns," Luna continued, as if she could hear his question. "I have to say your technology is fascinating. Very elegant, very sophisticated, very dependent on systems that assume no one will think to interfere with quantum entanglement using modified microwave radiation." Kira's eyes had gone wide. "Microwave radiation. Commander, they are using cooking technology to disrupt quantum entanglement." "That's impossible." "So was accessing our computers. So was turning off our ship. So was knowing our names." Kira's voice carried the brittle tone of someone whose worldview was crumbling in real time. "Commander, I think we need to accept that our understanding of impossible may be somewhat limited." Luna's voice continued through their speakers. "Now, I understand you have been conducting some sort of behavioral study on our settlement. As a scientist myself, I appreciate the value of research. However, conducting experiments on unwilling subjects without their consent is generally considered unethical by most civilized standards." "She's a scientist?" Vex asked weakly. "Astrophysicist," came Luna's immediate response, "specialized in applied quantum mechanics and adaptive engineering solutions. Which is why I was able to identify your initial electromagnetic pulse as artificial and why my team has been able to interface with your systems so effectively." The communication system crackled momentarily before Luna continued. "I'm also a former military engineer, which is why I'm not particularly amused by uninvited visitors who think it's acceptable to test weapons on civilian populations." "Weapons?" Kira exclaimed. "We weren't testing weapons. It was a harmless electromagnetic pulse designed to—" "Doctor." Luna's voice cut through Kira's protest with the kind of calm authority that suggested she'd heard similar excuses before. "Any unauthorized interference with life support systems on a frontier colony constitutes an act of aggression. The fact that you consider it harmless doesn't change the fact that you could have killed people." Vex felt his mandibles clicking rapidly. a nervous habit he'd developed during his academy days. "Doctor, perhaps we should consider establishing formal diplomatic contact." "Oh, we are well past diplomatic contact, Commander," Luna replied. "Right now we are in the practical demonstration phase of interspecies relations." "You wanted to see how humans respond to technological challenges. Well, congratulations. You are seeing it." Their ship's systems flickered again, and when they stabilized, every display screen on the observation deck was showing the same image, a detailed schematic of their ship's internal layout, with various systems highlighted in colors that probably didn't indicate anything good. "Commander," Kira said very quietly, "I believe we may have made a significant error in judgment regarding human defensive capabilities." Vex nodded slowly, his three eyes fixed on the schematics that Luna Torres had somehow extracted from their most secure databases. "Doctor, I believe you may be engaging in dangerous understatement." Luna's voice came through their speakers one more time, carrying a tone that made both aliens suddenly very aware of how far they were from any possible backup. "Gentlemen, you have approximately 6 hours to decide whether you'd like to continue this experiment, or whether you'd prefer to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution. I strongly recommend the latter option." The communication ended, leaving them in silence broken only by the sound of their ship's systems trying to cope with whatever the humans had done to them. "Doctor," Vex said finally, "I'm beginning to think we should have chosen a different species to study." 4 hours and 37 minutes before Luna Torres' new deadline, Vex learned what genuine terror felt like. It started when their ship's artificial gravity decided to take an unscheduled vacation. One moment he was standing normally at his command station. The next he was floating near the ceiling, watching his carefully organized data pads drift past his face in a slow, lazy spiral. Kira, meanwhile, had somehow ended up upside down relative to the deck plating, her tentacles writhing frantically as she tried to reach her control interfaces. Dr. Vex called out, his voice pitched higher than he'd intended. "Please tell me this is a standard system malfunction and not another example of human creativity." "Commander," Kira replied, attempting to orient herself toward her workstation while drifting slowly toward the observation windows. "Our gravitational compensation systems don't just malfunction. They are hardwired into 17 different backup networks, specifically to prevent this exact scenario." The artificial gravity returned as suddenly as it had disappeared, sending both aliens crashing to the deck with undignified thuds. Vex picked himself up, checked that all his limbs were still attached, and noticed that their primary display screens were now showing what appeared to be a live video feed of their own observation deck from outside their ship. "How," he asked very quietly, "are we looking at ourselves from outside our ship?" Kira struggled to her feet, her tentacles moving frantically across her control panels. "Commander, according to our sensors, there are no external monitoring devices anywhere near our vessel. Our hull integrity is perfect, our cloaking field is still active, and there are absolutely no foreign objects attached to our ship." "Then how?" "Because," Luna Torres' voice interrupted through their communication systems, "I'm not using external monitoring devices. I'm using your own internal security cameras, the ones that you apparently forgot to secure against outside access." On the main screen, they could see themselves from multiple angles, Vex looking progressively more disheveled, Kira's tentacles betraying her mounting panic, and most disturbing of all, the clear view of every control interface, every data display, every piece of sensitive information that should have been completely secure. "This is impossible," Kira whispered. "Our internal systems are isolated from all external networks. There's no possible pathway for." "Doctor." Luna's voice carried the patient tone of someone explaining something obvious to a particularly slow student. "Your ship's systems communicate with each other using quantum entanglement protocols. Once I figured out how to generate the right interference patterns, accessing your internal networks was just a matter of following the quantum breadcrumbs." Vex felt his three eyes focusing independently on different disaster scenarios. "Doctor, can she access our life support systems?" The temperature in the observation deck dropped 20 degrees. "I think," Kira said through chattering mandibles, "that answers your question. The environmental controls returned to normal, but the message was clear. Luna Torres could kill them whenever she chose, and they would be powerless to stop her. Now, Luna continued conversationally, let's discuss the terms of your unconditional surrender. Surrender. Vex's voice cracked embarrassingly. We are not surrendering. We are conducting legitimate scientific research under the authority of the Galactic Science Directorate. You can't just. Every screen in the observation deck went dark. The lights followed. Then the air circulation systems shut down with an ominous wheeze. In the absolute darkness, Luna's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Commander, you tried to disable our life support systems as part of your harmless experiment. From my perspective, that makes this a matter of survival. And humans are exceptionally good at survival. The systems came back online, but now every display screen showed the same message written in multiple alien languages. You have 2 hours to prepare your formal surrender. And 2 hours? Kira exclaimed. That's not enough time to contact High Command or request backup, or even compose a proper diplomatic. Dr. Vex interrupted, his voice hollow with the realization of their situation. I don't think High Command is going to help us. I don't think backup is coming. I think we are completely, utterly on our own. As if to emphasize his point, their long-range communication array suddenly activated and began broadcasting a message toward their home sector. Not a message they had composed. A message from Luna Torres. Attention, Galactic Science Directorate. This is Luna Torres, speaking on behalf of New Anchorage Colony. Your research vessel recently conducted unauthorized attacks on civilian infrastructure in what you apparently classified as behavioral studies. We are currently holding your research team pending formal apology and assurance that such incidents will not be repeated. Vex's mandibles clicked frantically. She's broadcasting our location to High Command. She's telling them we have been captured. Which means, Kira added weakly, that if they send a rescue mission, she will be ready for them too. The implications of that statement hit both aliens simultaneously. Luna Torres wasn't just defending her colony. She was establishing a precedent. She was sending a message to their entire civilization that humans were not to be trifled with. Commander, Kira said very quietly, I need to point out that our ship contains detailed information about 17 other species currently under observation by the Science Directorate. Vex felt his stomach sacs clench as he realized what she was suggesting. If Luna Torres could access their databases, she would have information about every species they'd ever studied, every world they'd ever visited, every experiment they'd ever conducted. She's going to warn them, he whispered. She's going to tell every species in our database what we have been doing. Their communication system crackled to life again, and Luna's voice confirmed their worst fears. Gentlemen, I have been reviewing your mission logs. Quite educational reading. I'm particularly interested in your reports on the Centauri dolphin analogs and what you classified as stress tolerance testing. I'm sure they'd be fascinated to learn about your research methods. The observation deck's temperature dropped again, but this time it wasn't due to environmental system manipulation. It was the cold realization that their careers, their mission, and possibly their lives were entirely in the hands of a human who had every reason to be extremely angry with them. Dr. Vex said carefully, how many species have we studied over the past 5 cycles? 37 confirmed intelligent civilizations, Commander, plus approximately 200 pre-contact societies that we have observed without direct intervention. And how many of those species might be interested in expressing their displeasure with our research methods if they learned about them? Kira consulted her data pad with trembling tentacles. All of them, Commander. Definitely all of them. Luna's voice returned, carrying the tone of someone who was thoroughly enjoying herself. I'm particularly curious about the species you designated as subject population Gamma 7. According to your logs, you tested their response to resource scarcity by temporarily poisoning their primary water sources. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. Vex stared at the human settlement through their viewing ports. trying to process the fact that their simple behavioral study had somehow escalated into what appeared to be an interspecies diplomatic crisis of unprecedented proportions. "Doctor," he said finally, "I believe we need to seriously consider Luna Torres' surrender terms." "But, Commander," Kira replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "I believe we need to consider the possibility that refusing surrender might result in consequences significantly worse than anything High Command could do to us." Through their speakers, they could hear Luna Torres organizing her people for what sounded like the next phase of their demonstration. Whatever she had planned for the remaining 2 hours, Vex was absolutely certain he didn't want to find out what it was. "Doctor," he said, his voice heavy with defeat, "prepare a formal surrender message." "Already working on it, Commander. Should I include an apology for the entire Science Directorate, or just for our specific mission?" "Include everything, Doctor. Include absolutely everything. And make it very, very sincere." 1 hour and 14 minutes before their self-imposed deadline, Vex discovered that Luna Torres had been playing an entirely different game than anyone realized. It started when their airlock systems activated without any input from the crew. "Dr. Vex said, his voice carefully controlled despite the fact that his 3 eyes were focused on 3 different panic scenarios simultaneously. "Please tell me our external access ports are not responding to unauthorized entry commands." Kira's tentacles were dancing frantically across her control interfaces, but the readouts she was getting made no sense according to any known principles of Starship security. "Commander, according to our systems, someone with proper authorization codes is requesting permission to board. Someone with proper authorization codes. Someone with command-level access to our ship's database, who knows our current security protocols and apparently has legitimate clearance to." The inner airlock door chimed softly and slid open with the smooth efficiency of a system operating exactly as designed. Luna Torres stepped into their observation deck wearing what appeared to be a perfectly functional environmental suit that definitely had not been designed by any human manufacturing facility. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said pleasantly, removing her helmet to reveal the kind of calm smile that Vex associated with predators who had just cornered their prey. "I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit, but I thought it was time we discussed the terms of your surrender in person." "How?" Vex asked weakly. "Are you here? Our ship is in high orbit. You don't have spacecraft capable of reaching this altitude. Your technology can't possibly." "Commander," Luna interrupted gently, "I think it's time you stopped making assumptions about what our technology can and can't accomplish." She walked calmly to one of their auxiliary control stations and began entering commands with the casual familiarity of someone who had been operating their systems for years. Every interface she touched responded immediately, displaying information that should have been accessible only to Senior Science Directorate personnel. "But," Dr. Vex whispered, "how does she know our access codes?" "Because," Luna replied without looking up from the control panel, "we have been monitoring your activities since the day you arrived in this system." "Did you really think a cloaked ship generating gravitational anomalies would go unnoticed by a colony of astrophysicists and engineers?" Kira's tentacles had gone completely rigid. "That's impossible. Our cloaking technology is centuries ahead of your development level. You couldn't possibly have the sensors necessary to detect quantum fluctuations in local space-time." Luna's voice carried the patient tone of someone explaining basic concepts to children. "Doctor, we have been tracking your ship's position to within 3 meters since you achieved orbit. We mapped your hull configuration using gravitational lensing effects. We identified your power signature by analyzing the electromagnetic spectrum variations you create just by existing." She touched another interface, and suddenly every screen in the observation deck was displaying detailed schematics of their ship. Not the basic external views they'd seen before, but complete internal layouts showing deck plans, system configurations, and crew quarters. "We have known about your behavioral study since before you implemented it," Luna continued conversationally. "In fact, we have been conducting our own behavioral study on your research team. The results have been quite illuminating." Vex felt his mandibles clicking so rapidly they were producing a sound like rainfall on metal plating. "Our own behavioral study? What do you mean, our own?" Commander, did you ever wonder why your electromagnetic pulse affected exactly the systems we wanted you to affect? Or why our defensive preparations were visible from your observation position? Or why our responses seemed so perfectly calculated to demonstrate specific human capabilities? The observation deck fell silent except for the increasingly urgent sounds of various system alerts that no one was paying attention to anymore. You are saying, Kira whispered, that everything we observed was deliberately arranged for our benefit? Everything you observed was designed to provide you with exactly the information we wanted you to have. Luna pulled up a new display showing what appeared to be a detailed timeline of their entire mission. We knew about your arrival before you finished achieving orbit. We knew about your research objectives before you selected your test parameters. We have been feeding you carefully controlled responses designed to escalate your involvement until you committed to actions that would justify more comprehensive countermeasures. Vex stared at the timeline, trying to process the implications of what Luna was telling them. You manipulated us. From the beginning. We defended ourselves. There's a difference. Luna's voice carried a note of steel that made both aliens step backward involuntarily. Commander, you arrived in our system with the intention of conducting unauthorized experiments on a civilian population. The fact that we were prepared for your activities doesn't make us the aggressors. She touched another control interface, and suddenly the observation deck was filled with holographic displays showing dozens of other star systems. Each one contained what appeared to be detailed information about alien civilizations, research activities, and something that looked disturbingly like target assessments. This is your complete mission database, Luna said calmly. 17 species currently under observation. 237 pre-contact civilizations being monitored for future study. 43 worlds where your science directorate has conducted behavioral experiments without the knowledge or consent of local populations. Kira's tentacles were trembling visibly. How did you access our core databases? Those systems are quantum encrypted with security protocols that assume no one will think to use harmonic resonance patterns to disrupt quantum encryption by introducing controlled interference at the molecular level? Luna's smile was the kind that made Vex wish he'd chosen a different career. Doctor, your security systems are very impressive. They are just not designed to account for someone who approaches the problem from a completely different technological foundation. She gestured to her environmental suit, which Vex was now realizing looked far more sophisticated than it had any right to. This suit, for example, contains technology that your databases say shouldn't exist. Quantum processors built using biological components, gravitational manipulation systems based on controlled molecular vibration, energy sources that operate on principles your science hasn't discovered yet. That's impossible, Vex said faintly. Your civilization hasn't even achieved faster than light travel. We haven't achieved your method of faster than light travel, Luna corrected. Doesn't mean we haven't figured out how to accomplish the same results using different approaches. Commander, the problem with studying primitive civilizations is that you tend to assume primitive means inferior. What it actually means is different. She touched one final control, and every system in the observation deck began displaying the same message: mission terminated. Return to base. Do not attempt further contact. I'm uploading your new mission parameters directly to your ship's navigation systems, Luna explained helpfully. You will find that your vessel is now programmed to return immediately to Science Directorate Headquarters, where you will be delivering a comprehensive report on why behavioral experiments on unwilling subjects are no longer considered acceptable research practices. You can't just reprogram our ship, Kira exclaimed. Our navigation systems are hardwired to prevent unauthorized modifications. We're hardwired, Luna corrected. Past tense. I have also taken the liberty of copying your complete database and transmitting the information to every species you have ever studied. I thought they might be interested to learn about your research methods. The full implications of that statement hit both aliens like a gravitational wave. Every species they'd ever observed, every experiment they'd ever conducted, every secret they'd ever kept was now being shared with the very civilizations they'd been studying. Luna, Vex said carefully, surely we can reach some sort of diplomatic arrangement. Perhaps a formal treaty governing future research activities, or a mutual non-interference agreement, or… Commander, Luna interrupted, her voice carrying the finality of someone who had just closed a very thick book. The only arrangement we are interested in is the one where you leave our system immediately and never come back. We consider it a learning experience. She walked back toward the airlock, pausing only to look back at the two aliens who were staring at her with expressions of complete bewilderment. Oh, and gentlemen, the next time you want to study human behavior, try asking permission first. You might be surprised by how cooperative we can be when we are not being treated like laboratory specimens. The airlock sealed behind her, leaving Vex and Kira alone with the smoking ruins of their careers and the growing realization that they had just been comprehensively outmaneuvered by a species they'd classified as primitively intelligent. Dr. Vex said finally, I believe we may need to revise our assessment of human cognitive capabilities. Commander, Kira replied, staring at the displays that were still showing every classified detail of their organization's activities, but I believe we may need to revise our assessment of everything. 37 minutes after Luna Torres left their ship, Vex received the most humiliating communication of his distinguished career. It came through their official diplomatic channels, which meant it was being recorded by High Command, archived in the Permanent Mission Database, and would likely be studied by xenobiology students for the next several generations. Commander Vex, Luna's voice carried the professional courtesy of someone conducting official business. This is Luna Torres speaking on behalf of New Anchorage Colony. We are prepared to accept your formal surrender and discuss terms for your immediate departure from this system. Vex looked at Kira, whose tentacles had been twitching nervously for the past half hour as more and more of their ship's systems reported unauthorized modifications. Their navigation computers were locked onto a direct course home. Their communication arrays were broadcasting their humiliation to 17 different species across 3 star sectors. Their mission logs had been edited to include detailed confessions of every unethical experiment they'd ever conducted. Dr. Vex said carefully, do we actually have any choice in the matter? Commander, our ship is currently programmed to depart this system whether we cooperate or not. Our databases have been copied, our mission has been terminated, and our careers are effectively over. Kira's voice carried the hollow tone of someone who had just watched their entire worldview collapse. I believe our only remaining option is to try to salvage some small portion of our dignity. Vex activated their response channel with the kind of resignation usually reserved for condemned criminals. MS Torres, this is Commander Vex. We acknowledge your superior position and are prepared to discuss surrender terms. Excellent, Luna replied, her voice carrying a warmth that somehow made their defeat even more embarrassing. Before we finalize arrangements, however, I thought you might benefit from understanding exactly why humans react so strongly to unauthorized experimentation. A new display activated on their main screen, showing what appeared to be historical footage from Earth, images of laboratories, test subjects, and scientific procedures that made both aliens deeply uncomfortable. You see, gentlemen, humans have a rather extensive history with unethical experimentation. We have done it to ourselves, unfortunately. Medical experiments on prisoners, psychological studies on unwilling subjects, biological testing on populations who couldn't give informed consent. Luna's voice carried a note of sadness that made Vex's mandibles click involuntarily. It took us centuries to develop ethical standards for scientific research, and those standards were written in the blood of people who suffered because scientists decided their curiosity was more important than their subjects' rights. More images flashed across their screens, documents, testimonies, memorials to victims of scientific abuse. Kira's tentacles recoiled from her control panels, as if the displays were physically painful to watch. When you decided to test electromagnetic weapons on our colony without our knowledge or consent, you weren't just conducting research. You were repeating some of the darkest chapters in human history. Luna's voice had gone very quiet, but somehow that made it more intimidating than if she'd been shouting. From our perspective, you weren't scientists conducting a behavioral study. You were aggressors attacking a civilian population. Vex felt his three eyes focusing on different aspects of their complete and utter failure. We didn't realize. Our protocols didn't account for species with historical experience of scientific abuse. Commander, your protocols didn't account for subjects who could fight back effectively, Luna corrected. There's a difference. If we'd been helpless, would you have been more ethical? Or would you have just been more thorough? The question hung in the air like a toxic gas cloud. Vex realized he didn't have a good answer, which was probably an answer in itself. Furthermore, Luna continued, your research methods assumed we would react with fear, confusion, and disorganized panic. What you actually encountered was a population of engineers, scientists, and former military personnel who took your attack as a professional challenge. A professional challenge, Kira whispered. Doctor, you tried to disable our technology using electromagnetic interference and for a colony of engineers. That's not a crisis. That's a puzzle to solve. You presented us with an interesting technical problem and apparently expected us to respond with primitive superstition instead of applied science. New displays activated showing the rapid transformation of the human settlement from peaceful colony to militarized fortress. But now, with context, the aliens could see it differently. Not panicked improvisation, but methodical problem-solving by people who were professionally qualified to handle technological challenges. Your behavioral study was based on the assumption that humans would be helpless victims of superior technology, Luna explained. What you discovered instead is that humans are exceptionally good at turning other people's superior technology into their own strategic advantage. Vex watched footage of humans casually rewiring alien-level technology using tools that looked like they belonged in a maintenance shop. How did you learn to interface with our systems so quickly? Commander, we didn't learn to interface with your systems. We learned to break them in useful ways. There's a significant difference. Luna's voice carried a note of professional pride. Your technology is very advanced, but it's also very dependent on specific operational parameters. Change those parameters, and your advanced systems become expensive paperweights. But the quantum encryption, the gravitational manipulation, the quantum encryption that assumes no one will use harmonic interference to disrupt entanglement states. The gravitational manipulation that becomes unstable when exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies. Life support systems that shut down completely if their control processors receive conflicting priority commands. Every example Luna cited was something that had happened to their ship in the past day. Vex realized that she wasn't guessing about their technological vulnerabilities. She was providing a detailed technical explanation of exactly how his ship had been systematically compromised. MS Torres, Vex said very quietly, may I ask what your background is exactly? Astrophysicist specializing in exotic matter interactions, former military systems engineer, and currently the coordinator for New Anchorage Colony's Defensive Planning Committee. Luna's voice carried the casual confidence of someone reading items off a grocery list. I also hold advanced degrees in xenobiology and comparative technology assessment, which is why I was able to identify your research activities so quickly. Xenobiology, Kira repeated faintly. You study alien species. I study how different species develop different technological solutions to similar problems. Your people, for example, developed very sophisticated systems that operate on predictable principles. Humans developed less sophisticated systems that operate on adaptable principles. When your predictable technology meets our adaptable technology, interesting things happen. Interesting, Vex said, is certainly one way to describe our current situation. Commander, you chose to experiment on a colony of scientists and engineers without bothering to research our capabilities, our background, or our likely responses to provocation. And from a scientific perspective, that represents a fundamental failure of experimental design. The communication channel crackled slightly as Luna continued. Your surrender terms are simple. You will return immediately to Science Directorate headquarters. You will deliver a complete report on why your research methods are ethically unacceptable and strategically dangerous. You will recommend immediate implementation of informed consent protocols for all future xenobiological studies, and you will strongly advise your colleagues against conducting unauthorized experiments on human populations. And if we refuse? Vex asked, though he was fairly certain he already knew the answer. Commander, your ship is currently programmed to execute those instructions whether you cooperate or not. The only variable is whether you deliver your report voluntarily or under circumstances that will make your failure even more obvious to your superiors. Vex looked at Kira, who nodded slowly. They both understood that their careers were over, their mission was a complete disaster, and their only remaining option was to try to prevent other research teams from making the same catastrophic mistakes. We accept your terms, MS Torres. Excellent. Safe travels, gentlemen. And remember, next time you want to study human behavior, try introducing yourselves first. You might find us surprisingly cooperative when we are not being treated like laboratory animals. The communication ended, leaving both aliens alone with the wreckage of their professional lives and the uncomfortable realization that they had just learned an extremely expensive lesson about why humans were not suitable subjects for unauthorized behavioral studies. 3 cycles later, Commander Vex stood before the Science Directorate High Council delivering what would undoubtedly be remembered as the most humiliating mission report in the organization's distinguished history. The assembled counselors listened with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for accounts of natural disasters or technological catastrophes. In summary, Vex concluded, his 3 eyes focused on different points in the council chamber to avoid making direct eye contact with anyone. Our behavioral study of human stress responses resulted in the complete compromise of our mission, our ship, our databases, and our professional credibility. Additionally, the humans have transmitted detailed information about our research methods to 43 different species, 17 of whom have filed formal complaints with the Galactic Ethics Committee. High Counselor Thrak, whose purple complexion had been growing progressively darker throughout the report, leaned forward in his seat. Commander, are you telling this council that a single human colony not only defeated your research team, but also managed to turn your own study into a weapon against the entire Science Directorate? That is correct, High Counselor, using technology that our databases classify as primitive, using technology that our databases failed to properly assess, sir. Dr. Kira and I have prepared a comprehensive analysis of human technological capabilities, and we strongly recommend immediate revision of our classification protocols. Dr. Kira stepped forward, her tentacles moving nervously as she activated a holographic display. High Counselor, human technology operates on fundamentally different principles than our own. Where we prioritize efficiency and predictability, they prioritize adaptability and improvisation. This makes their systems significantly more dangerous than our models predicted. More dangerous how? They don't just use technology, sir. They weaponize it. Their approach to problem-solving appears to be based on the assumption that any system can be turned into a weapon if you understand its weaknesses well enough. High Counselor Thrak's complexion had now reached a shade of purple that Vex associated with impending cardiovascular events. Are you recommending that we classify humans as a hostile species? No, sir, Vex replied quickly. We are recommending that we classify them as a species that becomes hostile when subjected to unauthorized experimentation. There's a significant difference. The council chamber fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. Finally, High Counselor Thrak spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. Commander, what are your recommendations for future human contact? Complete adherence to established diplomatic protocols, sir. Formal introduction, transparent communication of research objectives, and explicit consent for any observational activities. The humans appeared to be entirely cooperative when treated as equals rather than test subjects. As if summoned by their conversation, the council chamber's communication system activated without any authorization from the assembled officials. Luna Torres' voice filled the space with the same calm authority that had made Vex's life so complicated 3 cycles earlier. Good afternoon, High Counselor Thrak and distinguished members of the Science Directorate. This is Luna Torres speaking on behalf of humanity. The council chamber erupted in confused voices as security personnel frantically tried to determine how their most secure communication systems had been accessed by an unauthorized party. Vex simply closed his eyes and waited for the inevitable. I wanted to personally thank you for the educational opportunity your research team provided, Luna continued pleasantly. The technical challenge of compromising your ship's systems has significantly advanced our understanding of quantum interference applications. High Counselor Thrak's purple complexion had now achieved a shade that definitely warranted medical attention. How did you access our communication systems? The same way we accessed your research ship's systems, High Counselor. By identifying the underlying assumptions your technology makes about security protocols and then approaching the problem from directions you didn't anticipate. Are you threatening this council? Quite the opposite. I'm establishing diplomatic contact and offering formal cooperation agreements. Humans are extremely interested in peaceful scientific exchange with advanced galactic civilizations. We just prefer to participate as partners rather than specimens. Luna's voice carried a note of warm professionalism that somehow made her next statement even more unsettling. However, I should mention that we have shared our technical findings with several other species that have been subjects of your behavioral studies. They have expressed considerable interest in applying our methods to their own situations. The implications of that statement hit the council chamber like a gravitational wave. 43 different species, all of whom now had access to human techniques for compromising Science Directorate technology, all of whom had reasons to be extremely unhappy with unauthorized research activities. What exactly are you proposing? High Counselor Thrak asked carefully. Simple. Immediate implementation of informed consent protocols for all xenobiological research, establishment of formal diplomatic relations with species under observation, and perhaps most importantly, recognition that technological primitiveness does not indicate intellectual or strategic inferiority. The communication crackled slightly before Luna continued. High Counselor, humans have spent their entire evolutionary history dealing with predators, natural disasters, and hostile environments. When something threatens us, we don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to make sure the threat never bothers us again. Are you saying humans consider the Science Directorate a threat? I'm saying humans consider unauthorized experimentation an unacceptable violation of basic rights. How you choose to interpret that is entirely up to you. The communication ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. High Counselor Thrak looked at Vex with an expression that suggested his career prospects had somehow managed to become even worse than they already were. Commander, what is your professional assessment of human military capabilities? Vex thought carefully about everything he'd witnessed during their disastrous mission. High Counselor, I believe humans represent the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. Because of their technology? No, sir. Because they think like us. But they fight like something that's been trying to kill them their entire existence. Vex paused, remembering Luna Torres' calm competence as she systematically dismantled everything he'd thought he understood about interspecies relations. High Counselor, I recommend we never, under any circumstances, attempt to experiment on humans again. Not because we can't, but because the cost of success would be far worse than the consequences of failure. The High Council voted unanimously to implement Luna Torres' suggested protocols. After all, some lessons are too expensive to learn twice,